Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. This is the first in our series of AGNT leadership forums that are designed for our AGNT members only. Many of the people who are members of AGNT will be enjoying the broadcast as a recording, and we'll let you know as soon as we're finished and have the recording available for you. We'll let you know where you can find that. But in the meantime, I would just like to begin by welcoming you. It's a special program today because it's number one on the roster, and also because our opening presenter is AGNT Leadership Council Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell of the Church of Today, that's the old one, the Unity Center in San Diego. So what I'd like to do before we begin and get into telling you a little bit more about this program and turn it over to Wendy, I would ask if Wendy now would offer an opening blessing for the program before we get started.
I'm happy to do so. And first of all, I welcome everybody to our time together this evening and those who will be joining us later on in the recorded mode. And so I just invite you, if you're in a place where you're able to do so, to close your eyes and to join me in taking a few deep cleansing breaths, just breathing in the awareness of the presence and the power of infinite spirit, and breathing out a sense of gratitude. Just grateful for the opportunity to be together in this space, to use this technology to further the good work that each of us is called to do in our own way and in our own place. And so we give thanks in advance for a rich and meaningful, joy-filled and creative time together. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Wendy. Now, would you turn on your video camera, please? Because we're going to want to see you as well. Okay, perfect. Great. Okay, so let's just begin. And one of the most, as I've said before, one of the most enticing benefits of AGNT membership is this monthly online leadership forum, which will always be led and facilitated by AGNT leaders and sometimes their guests from within and beyond New Thought. Here's a place where our members will receive mentoring on a wide variety of topics, and you can engage personally with AGNT leaders in question and answer, live interactive dialogue. Eventually we'll have breakout groups to offer so that we can actually zero in on topics and get some work done. The Members Leadership Forum offers you the opportunity to suggest topics for mentoring and discussion that will serve and enhance your personal journey as well as your professional and your organizational pursuits. AGNT leaders will also share with you their inspiration, challenges, creative solutions, networking opportunities, and invaluable insights with regard to life, ministry, and social engagement. We are mutually blessed to enjoy monthly mentoring sessions with the leading voices representing Unity, Centers for Spiritual Living, Agape, and major New Thought organizations, collectively bringing hundreds of years of experience to our table. This is an opportunity for ministers and their teams, practitioners, teachers, and individual members to gain great experience in an intimate setting. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you and tell you a little bit about Wendy. I'm going to ask my co-host, Stephen Pope, who also knows Wendy and loves her as much as I do, to introduce her to you today. Stephen?
So I feel blessed and honored to introduce Wendy. Her impressive bio starts with the simples, such as she's a graduate of the Unity School of Christianity and was ordained in 1980. She's founder and CEO of the Unity Center, which Barbara and I still both think of as Church of Today, a 1,500 member spiritual community located in San Diego, California. She's been part of the Association for Global New Thought since 1999, 20 years. Reverend Wendy is revolutionizing New Thought in Southern California with such projects as the full-scale Fair Trade Boutique, which is stocked with products directly microfinanced by her congregation in villages to which they plan working visits through the center's Travel with a Purpose program. And if anybody wants, I would invite them to ask Wendy to describe both of those, the Fair Trade Boutiques and Travel with a Purpose. Wendy has participated in all 3 AGNT-sponsored synthesis dialogues, which brought together some of the world's leading thinkers to dialogue with His Holiness the Dalai Lama of Tibet. The first one in Dharamsala, India, in 1999, and then in Italy in 2001 and 2004. She also traveled to Istanbul, Turkey in 2006 as part of the planning team for the Abraham Path Initiative. This was undertaken in partnership with the Harvard Negotiation Project. And the goal was to open up a pilgrimage route in the Middle East, retracing the footsteps of the prophet Abraham, the shared prophet of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, in parentheses. With a strong interest in spiritually motivated social action, Wendy and the Unity Center are instrumental in the early formation of the San Diego Department of Peace grassroots group, which started in 2004. The Americans for the Department of Peace now encompasses all of Southern California and the Unity Center, with the Unity Center providing ongoing support. In addition, her service honors include the Gandhi Nonviolence Award from the Tariq Kamisa Foundation and induction into the Martin Luther King Jr. Board of Preachers Hall of Fame. So I'm going to sit up straight now for the rest of the talk by Wendy Craig-Purcell.
Yes, you can tell that she's done a lot in her career, and that's why we're so pleased to have her as our first presenter tonight. Since I do know that we're having a relatively small group in attendance live, but more people will be watching this by recording, I'm going to ask the attendees if they would mind if I just put them on the screen one at a time for a moment, just so that you can introduce yourself. We all thought that it would feel more like a conversation if we could have you say your name and a little bit about yourself. So if you absolutely do not want me to put you on the screen, okay, Eamon, I'm not sure if that's the way you pronounce your name, but I'm going to put you on the screen and ask you to introduce yourself and say hello to us. It'll take just a second.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Eamon. You were close enough. So yeah, it's good to be here. I'm a ministerial student here in Denver, and just kind of getting more acquainted with AGNT and, just everyone in the movement. So it's really exciting to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's nice to see your face. It actually makes the room feel more alive. So I'm going to put you back now.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask Martha. I'm going to assume that it's okay with Martha for me to put her on the screen.
Hello, everybody. This is Martha Creek. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida tonight, serving ministries for 20 years, and very grateful for this wisdom, this opportunity, and reconnecting with AGNT and billion years of wisdom that I drawed on way back and still draw on today, and lift you all up as you proceed, as we step into further and further reality of being the ones. I love, love, love you, and thank you.
Thanks, Martha. It's so good to see you again.
You too, Barbara. Yeah.
And now oops. Mansoor, I'm going to ask you if you would say hello to us for a minute.
Hello, this is Mansoor Vakili, and I'm really happy to be in this lovely and spiritual group that I can share. I can learn a lot, and I can enjoy being in this group. I guess Barbara knows me we've been having a lot of conversation and working together too. And basically, I think my message is that I'm trying to be a bridge between the spiritual and science in society. And or I'm already engaged with the science society as well as the system theorists and network theorists and all this too. And to convince them that this is a living system and then bring back the same conversation to the spiritual community leaders to see the potential of explaining that the divine is alive and how could we align ourselves as a living planet and living universe with those principles that simply could be explained.
Yes, it's fascinating work. And also I wanted to congratulate you on the first birthday of your first grandchild recently. I'm sure that was a very happy
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us tonight. So I'm going to take you off screen for a moment. And I'm going to ask you, Wendy, if you want to go ahead now and just begin the remarks that you were planning on talking about tonight, and we'll just see what happens.
Sure. So first of all, I really appreciate the opportunity to hear a little bit and of who's in the room, so to speak, and to see your faces, and just to hope that there are some things that I can share this evening that will be uplifting and helpful to you in the work that you're doing. So as Stephen had shared, I've been a part of the Association for Global New Thought for quite some time, and it is an organization whose work and purpose and way of being has really shaped and continued to grow me as a woman and as a spiritual teacher and a spiritual leader. And one of the things that that has happened through the work of Association for Global New Thought is, since our inception, we have been an organization that has brought together the leaders of the New Thought movement to stand together and to look at what are the things that we can do cooperatively and collaboratively together in the world today, standing on and using our spiritual principles and practices. And so we've done that, I think, very successfully for 20 plus years now. One of the things that has happened as a result of that is we've had a gathering of some of the most strongest and greatest leaders and ministers of highest consciousness, I would say, from Unity and Centers for Spiritual Living and some of our independent New Thought teachers as well, come together. And as a result of coming together and doing our work, we've really fallen in love with each other. We have great affinity, great affection, and great respect for one another. And as the landscape of our world has become so much more challenging in some ways, one of the things that became clear to me was how valuable it would be to replicate on a much smaller scale the model of the Association for Global New Thought in our local area. Specifically for me, that would be in San Diego. And I thought, let me see how I can bring together the family of New Thought in San Diego to, number one, get to know each other better personally, and to develop close collegial relationships to such an extent that we would want to do more together as ministers and spiritual leaders in San Diego itself. And so we've been gathering now several times over the last, I think it's maybe 6 months now, specifically looking at how can we be bolder together, new thought in action. Bolder together, new thought in action. And so we are examining together what that looks like for us in 2 different models. One of those models being what is actual physical work we could do in San Diego that would make a positive difference in the community beyond the 4 walls of our congregations. And how can we do that together? Another aspect that perhaps is even more exciting and in some ways I think deeper and more important is we have started to explore what would it be like if we as leaders of New Thought, the family of New Thought, came together and stood together around some of these really critical issues in our world? And so in one of the gatherings that I held of our ministers, New Thought ministers here in San Diego, we started discussing something that our ministry, the Unity Center, had done in the aftermath of the violence in Charlottesville. I personally feel very called to looking at what part I can play in helping to heal the issues of racism in our country. And so I shared with my colleagues in San Diego that we at the Unity Center took kind of a bold step, and that was to show the documentary film White Like Me, which addresses white privilege in the US, and to then have a discussion following the movie and just raise awareness. My congregation is primarily a white congregation, and I long for it to be much more diverse. And so we were absolutely thrilled to see what happened in San Diego. In our church, we had a very strong turnout for this movie. Almost 100 people came to watch the movie. But even more importantly than that, they wanted to stay to be in conversation around it. Now think about that for a moment. A predominantly white congregation, spiritually motivated, steeped in the tradition and the practices and teachings of New Thought, saying, we know we have some challenges here, very, very much so in our country around race. What can I, as a spiritually aware and caring person, do? I want to talk to others in my community about that. And so we had a very successful conversation. Now back to the ministers in San Diego. They had heard about this, and several of them shared with me their personal and ministerial desire to do something similar, but their very real and understandable worry and concern as to how it might be perceived by their congregants and whether people would leave their ministries upset because of holding such a conversation. And out of that very authentic ministerial sharing, minister to minister saying, you know, I really want to do this. I see the need, but I also feel some anxiety about how's my congregation going to respond? Are people going to leave? You know, we're living in a time right now that practically everything is heard and seen through a political lens. We stand for unity in New Thought. We stand for justice in New Thought. We stand for loving kindness in New Thought. We stand for non-judgment. And yet there's an intersection between all of what we stand for spiritually and the very real issues in our world today. So in that very authentic conversation that we were having as ministers, I said, well, what would it be like if we decided to stand together in these kinds of topics and issues? If we stood together, would we feel less afraid and more strengthened and have an even clearer and stronger voice around this or any issue like this? And that was met with tremendous warmth and response and the desire. So out of that, what we decided to do is in San Diego, we are all going to be joining together on Sunday, February 25th at 12:30 to be showing the movie, the documentary, White Like Me, each in our individual congregations at the same time, followed by an open, carefully facilitated or supported conversation to hear from those who watched the movie. What are some of the things that come up for you? What are some of the things that maybe you learned that you didn't know before? To have an open dialogue around that. And then through the wonderful technology that we have today, to create a video Zoom gathering where all of the ministers will be able to be video conferenced in at the same time, and the ministers will be able to reflect back to all of the congregation what surfaced in their individual ministries. What's I'm humbled by is that because of the tremendous long work that AGNT has done around the whole concept of Season for Peace and Nonviolence, that we are now, this idea has now expanded and is actually completely under the umbrella of the Association for Global New Thought. And now we have ministries, New Thought ministries, in all of the time zones in the US that will be joining on that particular day. So we can go back in a few minutes if there are any questions or comments about that particular thing that we're doing. But what is exciting to me about it is in the 30,000 foot view, really working together across and within the family of New Thought to examine in our local geographic areas, how might we come together as ministers and congregations and be bolder together, putting new thought in action. And so this kind of model around the movie I've mentioned is a model that could certainly be used for any topic, and the technology and the structure can be used for any topic, as well as the idea of actually coming together as New Thought in working in other projects out in the world. We've designed a logo and a brand and a look that we're happy to share with anybody else who is interested. But that's some of what we're trying to do in San Diego that we think might be replicable and helpful in other areas. I'm going to pause here for a moment. I kind of went really long there, Barbara, but I think I covered a lot of the things we had talked about.
No, that's great. That's how I was hoping that you would launch us. So I guess I'm going to ask now if pertaining specifically to the topic that you were just discussing about how can we actually look at the social issues of race and interfaith and intercultural diversity. And as we've been saying for such a very long time, if there was ever a conversation that should have spiritual principle and consciousness and sanity at the basis of it, wouldn't it be the kinds of challenges we're facing in society right now? And yet we're not finding leadership that really provides that kind of spiritual grounding and sane, considered consciousness that should always go into problem solving when it comes to issues like the ones that we're facing now. And they're almost intractable in many people's minds as all more divisiveness comes up. So pertaining to these specific issues about diversity and injustice and inequity in society, I would like to ask any of our attendees if you can go ahead and raise your hand and I can call on you. Would you like to make a comment or ask a question or bring up a challenge that you feel has been similar in your own congregation, or an idea that you've had but you're not really sure or feel secure about whether it will fly, or in your community? I'm not confining it only if you're a minister of a congregation. So far I see that the only hand up right now is Mansour, so I'm going to ask Mansour if he wants to ask a question or provide a brief comment.
Hello again. Yeah, regarding this project that Wendy is working, which is great, I was thinking that normally the reason we reject or get nervous about some issue and then we make a judgment is that we all have kind of prejudice inside of our mind because of the linearity of my mind. And when they are criticizing something, we feel it personal criticism. But if at the beginning of that film, we could make sure that everybody would understand the past is past, and whatever happened, happened. We are not judging or making any particular people or race as a victim. But that's the history, that what we are learning from it, and that's all there is to it. That could bring a little bit of ease to those people that they get irritated and respond negatively, and then negativity is very fast to grow and reject the idea rather than cooperate and learn something. And we see it through ourselves, even those prejudices inside, even though it's small, and become better person through any process that we are seeing from outside or other people. And one little comment about Barbara's question, that how could we, the leader, there is no leader and all this to bring out this solution to the situation and all this too. One issue that has been somehow forgotten in modernism is that we don't see that there is a bigger picture that is playing us at the same time too. And that bigger picture in the new way of looking at is a bigger network that is playing us. And all we need to know is just align ourselves with that bigger network that is trying to play us and act in any network with the cooperation, partnership, non-judgment, and asset management. And that's all there is to it. And there is already a leader in the system. We all have to follow it, and that's all. And it's just only a relationship problem rather than any other.
Yeah, thank you, Mansoor. Those are two very valuable suggestions. One is that, and I think New Thought is especially good at this, and I know Reverend Wendy is, that we should always be reminding ourselves that, I know this is a cliche, but today is the first day of the rest of our lives. So sometimes the best thing you can do is see how present you can become moving forward, because the minute that you get locked up in the dialogue of what's been wrong in the past, you never get to the new solutions. You never feel inspired by the possibilities. So that's a really wonderful suggestion. And when Wendy said a minute ago, from the 30,000 foot perspective, when you're looking at the whole bigger picture, it also is another opportunity to get past your immediate personal biases and issues and challenges, and another opportunity to see how others in the system are actually responding as well. So thanks for that. I'm going to ask for another comment, if anyone would like to, before we move on. Anybody else want to? Okay, so Wendy, do you want to go ahead and continue this? And then I might have a couple of questions for you after the next segment.
Sure. And you might be hearing my clock in the background. I apologize if that's distracting. We'll stop in just a moment. In listening to what you were sharing, Barbara, and into Mansoor's comments as well, I think that there is a real desire within those who are drawn into New Thought to see a new level of modeling and leadership from our leaders in these organizations, in our movements, around all of the issues that we're facing as a human family today. And I think it's true that it's a blessing, actually, that each of us seems to be drawn maybe a little bit more to one particular area of hurt or issue or injustice than the others. So there's more than enough work to go around, and there's more than enough unique capacities and perspectives, I think, to lend into the variety of issues that are before us. But it is such an important time right now that we find ways, both in, I think, in real time and through avenues such as this great technology that we have, to ask ourselves, how do we join together and lift our voice and move our hands and move our feet and have our heartbeat together toward the vision of the world that we really want for one another? And how do we do that in a bolder way and put that in action? I think that there's just a real yearning for that, and that we as leaders in this teaching really need to know that we have it within us to step into that role, quite frankly.
I wanted to ask you, Wendy, if since we have the time, Stephen had asked early on if you might say a little bit more about what you've done in your church with the both Travel with a Purpose program and the Fair Trade Boutique, because I'm so inspired. It's such an excellent example of how we can actually walk our talk. And when people say, I'm just one person, what kind of difference can I actually make in the world? To me, I tell that story often about what you've done. And, I just think that it's worth talking about a little bit so the people that are on the call and listening to the recording can hear more about it, and maybe they'll inquire as to how that could be done in their own church.
Be happy to. So first of all, we've already helped several churches in New Thought to establish their own fair trade boutiques or their own fair trade tables in their churches and their centers. But where Partners Fair Trade Boutique, which is the name of our fair trade enterprise at the Unity Center, where and how Partners Fair Trade Boutique started, and where and how our Travel with a Purpose program started, they began because of a comment that His Holiness the Dalai Lama made in one of our synthesis dialogues. He was asked a question by a young participant who was inspired by His Holiness's teachings. Well, what can I do when I go home to make a difference in the world? And part of the Dalai Lama's answer included this: travel and make friends. And I don't suspect that the Dalai Lama was talking about the typical kind of vacation travel that many of us do, and there's nothing at all wrong with that. But I think that he was talking about something deeper and much more important. What I got from his statement to travel and make friends was the need for us to, as people, to get outside of our own environments, outside of our own culture, and put ourselves out somewhere in the larger world and allow that larger world and people who don't speak the same language as we do, who don't have the same customs or cultures as we do, who do not look as we look, to let ourselves be influenced by and touched by and moved by and taught by being out in a different social structure in a different world. So I took that very much to heart, actually. I took that to heart personally. My husband and our children and I started traveling to expose ourselves to other parts of the world and learn about other people. And out of that, we learned a lot, and we understood why His Holiness suggested travel and make friends. And so what happened for us is we said, we could provide an opportunity for people in our ministry to travel with us and to do meaningful work in the world. And of course, there are any number of volunteer travel type programs in the world today. We certainly didn't create the idea of volunteer travel. But where ours is unique is, yes, we go through Travel with a Purpose, we go to other countries. Primarily, we have gone to Central or South America, mostly to Peru, actually. We have taken groups of people with us to do physical work, all under the model of microfinance and making a difference. And so very specifically, to answer Barbara's question and Stephen's question earlier, we have taken groups of people to Cusco, Peru, outside of Cusco, Peru, to work with an NGO in that area to physically build adobe greenhouses that are funded by microfinance loans that the Unity Center makes to buy the materials and to pay the local people who are going to teach us how to make this greenhouse and supervise the work. So we loan the money. We provide all of the physical labor alongside the teaching that the locals will do to build these greenhouses, which have a cash flow crop. So the greenhouses, the loan for the greenhouses are paid back by virtue of the fact that within these greenhouses are grown cash crops. It can be roses that are sold. Roses are very, very popular commodity in Peru for all kinds of celebrations and parties and gatherings. And so the people who receive these greenhouses know that they are doing so having to pay the money back or pay the money forward, that it is not a hand out, it is a hand up. And the result of the work that we've done is we have physically gone and built 4 greenhouses, but because of the model, over 12 have now been built through this particular model. The members who have gone with us to do this incredible work, I can truly say when they come back, they are changed. They are changed because they have traveled and made friends in a very different environment than they had ever been exposed to before. They have worked together with me in doing spiritual practice every single day. They have learned about microfinance, and they have seen the power of our spiritual teachings at work, because we deeply believe in New Thought, in the potential and the power of every individual given a chance to literally transform their lives. And so all we are doing is helping to provide that chance and to empower the individual to know that they have the capacity to pay that loan back and literally change their lives, which they have. Where that links with our Partners Fair Trade Boutique is that the money that the Unity Center acquires to fund the building of these greenhouses comes from beautiful fair trade handmade items from women from all around the world that are sold in our store, Partners Fair Trade Boutique. And a portion of all of those sales, as well as a portion of all of the sales in our Sangha Cafe coffee shop, actually go to the funding of these microfinance loans that build the greenhouses, and they could be used for any other project. We've considered solar projects, we've considered windmill projects, and so forth. And so what's exciting to me about this idea of a fair trade boutique is it's scalable for any size church. Most of our churches, even small churches, I remember when I founded my ministry in my living room and I had church in a box for a lot of years. I still would set out a table on Sunday mornings and sell books. We probably all do that. And as the church gets bigger, we get more books, and voila, eventually we might even have a bookstore. But I noticed quite a number of years ago that two things, that many in my congregation were not buying physical books as much anymore. They were buying them electronically. And at the same time, our congregation and I were desiring to be much greener. And we thought, maybe we shouldn't try to be as much a bookstore. Maybe we need to look at what used to be our bookstore as a place to support fair trade and support global work and global projects. And so we started to phase out our book inventory. We still sell some books, but probably 80% of what we have in Partners Fair Trade Boutique now are fair trade items. And our members learn about different cultures and different the different items and about fair trade, because the things that they're looking at, that they're attracted to, have a story behind them. And so this is something that is scalable really for any church that has a desire or an interest in maybe exploring a new and different way to become global. It can be very, very manageable. And in fact, when we began, we operated our bookstore fully as a bookstore, and we would just set out in our patio or in our lobby tables with fair trade items on them. And we started talking about fair trade and talking about microfinance. And there was a hunger in our community among our people to learn about some of these concepts. So that's Partners Fair Trade and Travel with a Purpose in as much of a nutshell as I'm able to do.
No, it's wonderful. I was writing, I'm going to ask if our attendees might be thinking about comments or similar situations that they might want to share or other questions. But I wrote down a couple of comments as you were talking. First of all, I was thinking, without really planning the blueprint every step of the way, in other words, as you began, you didn't necessarily know exactly what would happen. It emerged as it went, which is a new paradigm way of learning and manifesting. But you managed to create a kind of a beautiful little ecosystem within your own congregation and the people who cared about the issues together. And I always felt that rather than have a very grandiose and far-flung vision that you actually never manifested, it's always good to just start having small, deliverable, palpable successes in a community in order that we can assure ourselves that we are capable of undertaking the things that don't have to remain just dreams that we have that we think that we'll never accomplish. And the only real way to do that, I think that I'm not sure if you mentioned this a little earlier, but didn't you say that there was an African proverb? Did you mention that?
Proverb is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. No.
So that really struck me as something that in creating an ecosystem in your spiritual community, you achieved so many of those goals and objectives by having your congregation demonstrate to itself that it could care about things, discuss and share the things that it cared about, have plans about how not only could it achieve those in an emergent way, it didn't have to be a very important and large-scale project right from the beginning, because it would build itself over time. And it reminds me, do you remember Dr. Arya Ratney, little Ari from Synthesis Dialogues? And one of my favorite stories I actually haven't thought of in a long time is that he would go into these villages where they literally had no infrastructure at all. And the entire village would work together and perhaps build a very basic road out of, rocks and whatever they could find, just so that they could have a little bit more convenience to have a through road to the next village. And he said that he does remember that just as they were finishing one of these roads, what do they call it? Monsoon would come and just completely wash out all the work that they had just done. And his reaction to that, rather than to allow those people to become demoralized, was to say, more important than the fact that you built that road is the fact that that road is building you. And so that's kind of the feeling that I have as you talk about this, that you happen to have centered on these particular projects in your community. But I really would like to hear from some of our attendees what other kinds of projects could be done in community, not just churches, but in community, that could accomplish the same goal of first building the community itself and then also being of service to others in the world. So I'm going to stop here and ask if anybody would like to comment.
Hi, everybody. So yeah, I really appreciate what you're doing. That's really cool, Reverend Wendy. And for myself, I mean, being a second-year ministry student, I'm clarifying what my ministry is, and it's working with men. I feel like right now, it's something that's close to my heart that I've done for a very long time and that I really enjoy. But I feel like right now, more than ever, to hold that higher vision of what mature masculinity looks like in our world. And I think we're seeing a lot of the other, and really just like what your community is doing. Yeah, how can we kind of become more aware of who we are and stand up for our principles of a world that works for everyone? Yeah, I think that's the exciting thing that I'm working with is how can we create more healthy masculinity, and not only within our communities and support that within community, but also take that out in the service aspect of serving spiritual centers, but also serving, the world at large. I don't know what the world at large looks like. I'm not to that place yet, but projects like that to go places and build things. Guys love to build things. So, that's, I think that's an exciting prospect in the future for sure. So yeah, very exciting stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That question was in the back of my mind, and I'm glad that you shared it, this idea of what does mature masculinity look like in this new paradigm. Thank you for that. Wendy, did you have any comment on that?
I'd love to talk a bit about that. So, Eamon, first of all, I really, really acknowledge where your passion is around this and underscore how very needed it is right now. There's my mind's in so many different places. I had a long board meeting with my board on Saturday, a 4-hour meeting, which we do like once a quarter or so. And we invited a couple of new board members at large, 2 men, and I have several other men on my board. And I looked around them as we had done our check-in, and I said, I really want to acknowledge something to each of you. I've been thinking how difficult it must be, how challenging it must be right now to be a conscious male in our world with everything that's going on around Me Too, and that all the sexual harassment has to stop, which absolutely positively it does. But my mind and heart are also in the place of how do we support the very men who are not that to feel so strong in the fact that they are not that they feel free and supported by women and other men to continue to voice what it is to be this male that is whole and strong and sensitive and all the things that we know that you really are, right? And I remember saying to the men in my circle how touched I am and how honored I am to sit in the presence of men who are conscious, who are aware, and who are awake, and what hope it gives to me. I remember when I was pregnant with my son, who's now 26 years old, and I grew up in the feminist 70s, and, yes, it's really important that we support our girls, absolutely. But you know what? I really think that we need to do an even stronger job right now in supporting our boys and our young men to be the kind of male that I think you're pointing to. That's going to change the world, in my humble opinion, more than anything else. So yay you.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree. In fact, that's our main service project is youth rite of passage work with young men. I think it's imperative because when you catch them at like 11, 12, 13, 14, they're more easily able to heal those things. They don't have the same woundings. They don't need to go through the same processes, and it's easier. It's easier to help develop a healthy boy than to heal a broken man down the road. So it takes much less energy, and then they can have this diving board of just going right off into their life and into being the man that they want to be, being the healthy individual that they want to be, and especially modeling that for others in our communities, especially, and in the world too. So yeah, I'm excited by that. We have a pilot program that we're working on with Reverend Barry at Mile High Church. We're going to have our first Young Men's Rite of Passage program this year, we're hoping. So.
Wow, that I didn't know that we were going to go in this direction, but I'm glad that we did. It's so important right now. AGNT just, it has these in this series of webinars, we have 4 different topics. And the second one coming up on February 5th is a webinar live that we call the Divine Feminine Peace Spa, which affirms the divine feminine and the emerging masculine. And it's a place for us to talk about how can we, again, why would we choose a divisive model when what we want is a holistic, balanced model, because we all know that we feature aspects of the divine feminine and the divine masculine within all of us, and that the superficial discord of the society is based on such an unhealthy view of consciousness in general. So I want to hear more about this as time goes on, but thank you for sharing that. I'm going to ask someone else to make a comment. Hold on a second. We're coming toward the end of our program, and Wendy has a little more to say, but I'm going to ask Mansoor if you'd like to make a brief comment.
I guess that we are going through this transition or transformation, actually, that the domination of left side masculine brain is becoming somehow to, rather than dominating right to the left, cooperation of right and left, and spiritual and linear mind. And it's much, much deeper in the relationship that exists all around the world between man and woman. If you look at the East, they are saying to cover the woman, and then here they are saying to take it off and show it up. So it's just the same way, domination in different language and different way of doing it. So it's been somehow entertaining, and we're looking at the woman as a secondary human being because of just sexual difference, and making it such that you can, they are made for your sexual enjoyment rather than humanistic and equal relationship that it requires for human being to be. As far as the other, can I talk one more? Okay. As far as the
just briefly though,
activity and all this too, I guess the activity starts within us to realize if our brain and body is in synchronicity and working together to create the whole that is greater than sum of the parts. And as you know, subconsciously this is happening when I'm talking with the ease of, without any effort. I'm doing the most complex thing right now to talk. Just take one word from my mind to your mind. But at the same time, when it goes to the linearity of mind, is the one that is not as creative as the system is. And I'm focusing on that to see how could I first make a relationship between brain and body as a whole network, rather than only domination of the brain that it just wants to have a short gain of itself to information or sugar or whatever it is, and forget about the whole network. That relationship starts from this concept first in our body, and then to any relationship that we have with the family, with the partners, with the whoever in any network we are participating with. How could we participate for the long-term goal of the network with the cooperation, partnership, asset management, and non-judgment?
Yeah, thank you. That's, as you know, I know your model very well, and I think it would really be worth looking into whether we would like to present a conversation about that one of these days, because it's more relevant now than ever. So thanks for sharing that. We're getting toward the end of our time here. And Wendy, did you have a couple other wrap-ups or comments that you wanted to share before we actually signed off?
I'll be very, very brief because I'm aware of the time. What's coming to me is that just what we've done together this evening in this conversation is going to be very organic. I think what's going to happen over the next several iterations of these gatherings and dialogues is we're going to know even better the kind of work we might do together, who the players are, and how we can each bring our heart, our mind, our talents, and our gifts into this larger human family and into the larger issues of the world around us. And in much the same way that you pointed out in our evolution at the Unity Center with our Partners Fair Trade Boutique, we didn't know when we started where we would end up, but we knew the heart and the mind, and we had a sense of what we were being called to. And I just really feel that deeply about what's happening for AGNT and how we are convening these kinds of conversations. And I look forward to seeing the greater good that's going to come through them. I know it will.
Thank you. Anybody else have some concluding remarks tonight? I myself have really enjoyed the conversation because to me, it always comes back to, the world is such an interesting place right now. And as long as we've been talking about the religious right, there's now a great opportunity for the spiritual left to not divide society further, but basically to demonstrate by its example how we can actually live and embody our spiritual principles in a way that creates a better world for everyone, and in a way eliminates that divide that we always hold between the sacred and the secular. That's an illusion. And if the time is actually requiring anything right now, I think is to dissolve that boundary so that we as spiritual beings, by our choices and our consciousness, are actually living those spiritual principles in the world and creating a world and a society that looks like a better place for everyone and a more reasonable spiritual experience of reality. And I think that I've gained a lot of insight during the course of this conversation about how we need to redouble our effort in everything that we do and get together and have these talks and have these gatherings and share these ideas with others, because that's really the only way that we're going to make a difference. And so I want to say a very, very deeply sincere thank you to all of you who have come today, and to Wendy for the work that you've done in the world, because it's magnificent, for who you are, and for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedule to be with us tonight.
My pleasure.
So thanks, everyone. Stay tuned for what we'll be doing in the AGNT Leadership Forum next month. I'll be sure and communicate to you about who we'll be talking with and what the topic will be. So thanks for coming. Bye.
Bye.